launched a major overnight assault on Ukraine, firing 24 ballistic missiles, 1 cruise missile and 219 drones. Ukraine's Air Force reports that 16 missiles and 197 drones were intercepted by air defense units. The cities of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro and Odessa were the main targets of the attack. We'll bring you all the updates coming out of Ukraine as soon as we get them here on NewsX World. But now we move to our top story of the hour and the ongoing negotiations between the United States and Iran. Washington and Tehran appear ready to compromise to secure a nuclear deal, but expanding negotiations to include Tehran's ballistic missile program could lead to conflict. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has warned. Fidan told it is positive that the US seems willing to allow limited uranium enrichment within clearly defined boundaries. The US and Israel have said talks should cover both Iran's nuclear program and its missile capabilities. Iran, however, has rejected linking the two issues in negotiations. Peter Baum joins us now, the editor of the Weekly Blitz. He joins us live from London. Peter, thank you very much for joining us, first of all. But second of all, how remarkable is it that these talks have indeed got to this stage, particularly post that meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, where it was predicted that Israel was going to highlight a hardline stance to Donald Trump. He initially went into these talks not wanting to separate the Iranian-supported proxies to the Iranian missile program from that nuclear enrichment program. However, it seems to have happened. The United States is opening to negotiating the Iranian nuclear program on its own without discussing those other issues. What are your thoughts on how this has developed?
Yeah, I don't think too much emphasis should be placed on the positive news here, Thomas. The stalling of the negotiation process suits both sides. Let me explain why. The Iranians are ill prepared for conflict with the United States, and the United States are preparing for conflict but aren't quite ready yet because all their military capabilities and hardware are not yet in place. So stalling the negotiation actually suits both sides, as I've said. Now, Trump's red lines, despite the comments coming out from the White House and the Iranians, remain in place. Those red lines are certainly for non-enrichment of uranium, for ballistic missile production to cease, for the Iranians to stop arming and funding their proxies, and for the Iranians to stop the atrocities being committed on domestic opposition. I don't think Trump has changed that position, but is being very diplomatic in his wording of leaving the door open. However, the political analysts are suggesting, as I've said just now, that by stalling the negotiations, both sides are actually suited by this. We will see in approximately 1 week's time, given that there's yet another aircraft carrier on its way to the region, we will see in about 1 week's time whether this, how flexible either side is in the negotiation process and how far they will go to comply with each other's requests. At the moment, I think Trump is playing, as he did in the before he bombed Iran, is playing a very cagey diplomatic game, and is leaving the door open, or seems to be leaving the door open diplomatically. But I wouldn't place too much emphasis on how positive an outcome will be going forward.
My point was that these two sides are continuing to negotiate despite how far they seemed apart going into these Muscat rounds. However, on the topic of enrichment, the Turkish foreign minister has said that the US is ready to allow limited uranium enrichment within clearly defined boundaries. This was something that was completely off the table before in those previous rounds back in March. Why the breakthrough on that now if the Turkish foreign minister is indeed reporting the correct information?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Turkish foreign minister is reporting the correct information. Now, Turkey's role here is very interesting. I think I was being interviewed by yourself just before the first round of the negotiations was supposed to take place in Turkey, if you remember, and the Iranians moved that to Oman. Now, why? At the time, we couldn't gather sufficient information as to what actually happened. But since that time, we understand that Turkey upset the Iranians because of Turkey's support for the board of peace with Trump, in which Turkey not only wants to be engaged, but also wants a role for her peacekeeping force. Turkey sees that there are economic benefits to be gained by joining Trump's board of peace. Iran were apoplectic at this and decided to move the talks to isolate Turkey from them indeed and have the talks in Oman. Now, Turkey, realizing what a faux pas she made in upsetting the Iranians, are now trying to re-engage with them and are trying to make diplomatic noises and statements that give the Iranians some hope for flexibility in the negotiation process. However, this has upset the Trump administration because Trump wants to retain those four red lines, as I've mentioned before, whilst leaving the statements, the political statements, wide enough to give the world at large some cause for hope that there will not be conflict. But I assure you, Thomas, the United States will continue to stand by those four red lines, as I call them, regarding the negotiation process. Netanyahu, who's been at the White House recently, must be seen, despite his cause for concern, must be seen to keep pushing Trump to adhere to those red lines. And whilst the world at large thinks that there is some kind of gulf between them, I assure you, Thomas, that the United States and Israel are both committed to seeing the downfall of this Iranian regime.
Okay, Peter, do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. We head over to the United States, and a newly released